Blessed are the peacemakers, said Jesus. Do you believe in this? Who do you think is more valuable, peacemakers or war makers? Or who will be more popular between the two? If you want to win an election, should you make peace or should you make war? Should you spread love or should you preach hatred? Should you promote communal harmony or should you organize a communal riot? Why is it that the members of our species, who are supposed to be rational creatures, who are also supposed to be spiritually sensitive creatures that are imbued with the capacity to understand the situation, not only in terms of what is good for oneself, but also what is good for others, or the capacity for sympathetic imagination, which is sometimes also referred to as social imagination. Why is it that this species, which is supposed to be so very special, the crown of God's creation as it is sometimes put, has a far greater instinctive affinity to violence, destruction, bloodshed, hatred, malignancy, malevolence, than to love, to friendship, to life itself, to compassion rather than cruelty? This should make us think, particularly in the light of the many instances that are truly shocking, that buffet us from day after day. It is in such a context that I invite you to share this little time with me to reflect very, very simply, basically, on Jesus' beautiful words, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be the children of God." Now, first of all, Jesus is saying that you have to make peace. What does it mean to make peace? Since I was the teacher of a language, English language and literature, I'm somewhat sensitive to the accuracy of meanings, word meanings, or what's called semantics. Now, to make, see, God made, or more, God created the world. To make something in the spiritual sense is to cause something to come into being that did not exist there. There are two types of people. One is those who really want to thrive on peace, or those who want to live in peace. Jesus is saying that's not enough. You have to make peace. You have to create peace. And you have to create peace in a situation where peace does not exist. And therefore, what you have to do is actually to create the foundation for peace. And that will involve addressing the need to touch human nature, but in respect particularly of this very peculiar orientation in our nature, which makes us instinctively prefer violence rather than peaceful coexistence, cruelty rather than compassion, war rather than peace. So much so, Saint Augustine in his classic work, the Civitas Dei, or the City of God, says that men will preach peace and prepare for war at the same time, because there's a neurotic affinity to war making and war mongering as far as human nature is concerned. So, the people that you really respect most in history are all war-mongers and warriors. Now, if you make a list of the people who are recognized as great by all people, they're all people who have caused maximum loss of life. Alexander the Great, Charlemagne the Great, Napoleon the Great. Because in the Indian context we call Gandhi the Mahatma, By the way, the word Mahatma was ascribed to him not in India for the first time, it was in South Africa. And that's the reason why Nelson Mandela said that India sent us a barrister and we returned a Mahatma. But other than that, a person who advocates peace and what it takes to propagate a culture of peace will not even be taken seriously. If a messenger of peace fights a parliamentary election, he is sure to lose even his deposit. But everybody wants peace, everybody wants to live in peace. Now this is a conundrum and this is a contradiction, the riddle that we need to address. So Jesus says, you have to shift from the present idea or present outlook of wanting to take the benefit of the peace that somehow comes into being or peace that other people create, paying the price for it. There is a price to be paid for peace, just as there is a price to be paid for war. But surprisingly, people are a lot happier and more willing to pay the price for war, humongous price for war, than the small price for peace. This again is something very typical of human nature. So the first thing that we have to remember in this context is we have to make peace rather than seek to take advantage of the peace that already exists or the peace that other people are creating. We can't be consumers of peace, we have to be makers of peace. A society will live in peace, or in a society, peace will exist on firm and steadfast foundations if all members of the society, at least a majority of the members of society, are committed to peacemaking rather than peace consuming. But even that is not the issue today. People think that the only problem solving technique is violence, and the only sure path to victory, profit and power is engineering large scale violence. And in the same world, people also will preach peace. Hence the wisdom of Saint Augustine, that people will preach and prepare for war at the same time. So Jesus is very clear about it. I've on many occasions in the past referred to Jesus' astonishing sense of history, and this is one such. Jesus knew pretty well that the affinity to war and violence is so deep-rooted in human nature that most people will not think of becoming peacemakers or will not think of preferring in actual practice the way of peace rather than the way of violence. That's the first thing to remember. Every one of us has a duty to be peacemakers within our own context, in our own ways. And we can, of course, later on examine how this may be done, but that won't be possible in this video because the time available is limited. So this is the first point. We all have to become peacemakers. Number two, what does it mean to make peace? What is the principle of peace? Or if you like a more technical word for it, what is the paradigm for peace? What is the peace paradigm? It's very simple. It's astonishingly simple. Astonishingly simple. It is so simple that nobody wants to understand it. And Jesus stated it so explicitly, so beautifully, so unforgettably. Jesus says, do you want to establish global peace, local peace on a firm footing, enduring foundation? Just one principle is enough. Love your neighbor as yourself. Nothing more is required. If humankind can practice just one principle, loving your neighbor as yourself, in this world, which is spherical, every human being is a neighbor to everybody else. That's the beauty of the earth on which we live. On this earth, if we can shake ourselves free from the fetters of negativity, hatred, prejudice, etc., within which we are shackled, we'll realize that on this earth, every human being is a neighbor to everybody else. So if we can love our neighbors as ourselves, then there'll be peace in this world. And that's precisely what human beings have proved themselves to be incapable of doing. One of the lessons that history teaches us is that all wars have been, at least the vast majority of wars have been between neighboring countries. If at all there is a war involving two nations that are geographically well separated, it's only as part of this local skirmish between two neighboring countries. For example, Russia and Ukraine, or what's happening in Gaza between the Jews and the Palestinians. Other nations will get involved, but basically it's a quarrel between two neighbors. So unless and until people are able to coexist with, love their neighbors, there will be no peace in this world. And the important thing, and this is what Soren Kierkegaard made me aware of, the important thing about the neighbor is that the neighbor is a concept which is free from all divisive labels. Your neighbor may be anyone. Your neighbor may be a Hindu. Your neighbor may be an agnostic, a rationalist, an atheist, or a pietist, or a drunkard, a street rowdy, a saint. It may be anyone. Is he your neighbor? You are under obligation to love him. And not only love him, loving actually means treating him as you would like to be treated. Loving him as you love yourself. For example, you tolerate a great deal of nonsense in you or less than perfect things in you simply because you love yourself. So love in actual practice is unlimited patience and tolerance. Willingness to overlook many a blemish. And the determination not to give up on oneself. If you give up on yourself, you commit suicide. So, if you love your neighbor as yourself, you will not give up on your neighbor, irrespective of what he does. Surely we tolerate a great deal more of blemish in ourselves than we tolerate in others. This precisely is what needs to change. So, only one thing is needed to establish global peace. It's foolish and futile to think that the nuclear bomb will safeguard peace in the world. History has taught us that it simply is not the case. In fact, many authors on peace in the 20th century, after 1945 that is, said that there will be no wars in future because it's impossible to fight wars because the victory of one will be the defeat of all. Even the victor will be caught up in this conflagration. Therefore, it makes no sense. It's absolutely absurd to wage war. It will be absurd. As it was put philosophically in those days, when you perfect an instrument to its absolute level, it will become useless. So the absolute perfection of the engine or technology of destruction is a nuclear bomb, hydrogen bomb or whatever. And that will make fighting or war making impossible. But hundreds of regional battles have been fought and battles are raging. And the number of battles seems to be only increasing. And therefore, this idea that the nuclear bomb would make wars impossible has turned out to be a non-starter. So that's not the solution. The solution is only laying the foundation for peace, which has to be laid on the foundation of human nature itself. As long as there is this proclivity to violence, domination, destructiveness, etc., prevalent and active in human nature globally, war and war-mongering will become inevitable, more and more popular, and more politically rewarding. I remember a peace conference that was organized in Delhi some years back. At that time, President APJ Abdul Kalam was the President of India. Some 35 countries participated. And the inaugural session was emceed by me. So, as part of my introductory remarks, I said, I have a formula that will abolish war and war making forever and establish peace permanently on planet Earth. And people thought I was mad, out of my senses, because nobody ever believes that this is possible. So everybody pricked his ears. Now what's this man going to say? I said, it's very simple, absolutely simple. All nations of the world should come together. I couldn't have said in that was not a religious gathering, it was a purely secular gathering. I couldn't have said Jesus said this, Jesus said that. So what I said is, abstracting this wisdom of Jesus, I said, if the nations of the world can come together and pass a law that those who declare war must also fight it, then there will be no wars fought in this world. The arrangement today is that the people who declare war are never affected by the war, and poor people go and die. They become fodder in the theater of war. And the people who decide to launch wars, they benefit from it. Make warmongering as costly for those who want to launch wars as it is for those who fight and die in the battlefield. Then there will be absolutely no war in the world. And I still believe in it. Why? I was actually rephrasing the teaching of Jesus Christ, who said, love your neighbor as yourself. Now, just as you don't want to die, you should also not want to kill somebody. And that was the point that Count Leo Tolstoy was making. And all of you know, he was one of the staunchest pacifists Europe has ever seen. His very first novel was Sevastopol, which was written in the context of the Napoleonic Wars, which raged mostly in this region, Crimea and all that place. Very interesting to read that novel now. And that Tolstoy wrote and published that novel at the age of 26, if I remember right. That launched Tolstoy as a major literary force in the world. And he later on became the staunchest anti-war pacifist of Europe. And in fact, Tolstoy went to the extent of saying that rather than fight, he would rather allow his enemy, if there is an enemy, to take over all his property, all his wealth. Even then he would not defend. He said, I will not use violence even to defend myself. And that position was slightly different from what Gandhi said. Gandhi's non-violence, or ahimsa, left a margin for violence legitimately to be deployed in the interests of self-defense. Tolstoy went a step ahead. He said, even for the purpose of self-defense, I will not resort to violence. Because he says, after the enemy has conquered, taken over my land, etc., etc., and after the excitement dies down, he would realize that all this is of no use to him. And today, the heady excitement about conquering and snatching somebody's property derives its value largely from the idea of private ownership. And if I have no sense of private ownership, what does it matter to me? Now, you might think that this is far too idealistic and impractical, but that's what Tolstoy said. And he's someone who abandoned his huge estate and substantial property. He had about 14,000 acres of land, 700 serfs, and a huge manor house just near Pollyanna. And he walked out of everything at the age of 82, and he died in somebody else, a stranger's house. So Tolstoy was one who clearly saw through the fallacy, the meaninglessness of all this. I'm not claiming that I've reached that stage. I still have a roof of my own over my head. So the matter is very simple. Can we reach a stage where we can love our neighbor as ourselves? And I'm therefore surprised to see that in a state like Kerala, religious leaders are trying to spread hatred between neighbors. In Kerala, most regrettably, attempts have been made and still are being made to foment hatred and hostility between Christians and Muslims. And of course, there is hatred and hostility between political parties. Within political parties, various groups. In fact, rivalry between groups within a party is more ferocious and more cancerous than the hatred and violence between two parties, so on and so on. It's an extremely unedifying and unhealthy situation. It is in such a context that we need to commit ourselves to becoming peacemakers rather than war makers and warmongers. Is it possible? It's far too easy, but unfortunately, we have been hardwired in this mindset of violence and warmongering that people will dismiss this idea as too naive and impractical, and I'm sure there will be many responses to that effect. But I have tested this out on many occasions, though in Delhi I was known as a man of controversy. The fact of the matter, and God knows the truth, I tried to treat everyone as I treated myself, but the world, the society is not used to it, and therefore, when you treat somebody as you treat yourself, that person thinks that you're a fool, and therefore he comes and makes life miserable for you. I remember a few months after I assumed office as a principal of St. Stephen's College, the former head of the Sanskrit department, a very wise man called Dr. Harsh Kumar, came to visit me. After initial preliminary courtesies, he told me, he said, "Sir, you are doing something extremely risky. This will not work. Please don't treat others as your equals because you are the principal of the college." This idea that principal is one among equals is good theory, but it doesn't work. And certainly your colleagues are not used to it. They are used to strong arm methods. They are used to being treated as unequals. And therefore, if you try to treat them as you treat yourself, you'll get into serious trouble. Yes, I got into serious trouble, and prolonged trouble, serious and prolonged trouble. But today I can tell you that path is a lot better than the alternate path of hierarchical denigration of everyone else, so that you can project yourself as the unrivaled, unequaled authority in the given context. Yes, that's the way of the world, I do agree. Yes, that seems to work and work well for some time. But I can assure you that in the long term, that is extremely counterproductive, both for the person concerned and even more for the institution or the country concerned. This is what history has proved to me beyond any doubt. And if you know any instance to the contrary, please let me know. Please let me know if there's any instance in which a leader who looked down upon everybody else, looked down upon the people he led, proved to be a long-term blessing on the people. So the fact remains that peace is possible. Everyone wants peace, but unfortunately everyone's instinctive inclination is towards war making, warmongering. And this contradiction in our nature needs to be addressed. Therefore, particularly through the education that we practice, we need to propagate a culture of peace. I had the opportunity to chair the National Focus Group on Peace Education under the NCERT curriculum framework for formulating exercise that produced National Curriculum Framework of 2005. And I knew, of course, that the hard work that I put into it will not bear fruit because nobody believes in peace. Nobody wants peace. So the significant work done towards incorporating fundamental insights into the culture of peace and promoting a culture of peace through education remained totally neglected. And yet, ask every individual, he would say, well, we want to live in peace. But ask a parent whether the time that his or her son or daughter spends in school, 1 hour per week, should be spent on educating the child about the fundamentals of the culture of peace, And very likely the parent would say, no, teach my daughter computer science or something. That would help him or her get some job somewhere. Though now, of course, parents are realizing, because of the many absolutely shocking events that have come to light of late, that it is necessary to orient children towards peace rather than towards violence. And unfortunately, not enough is done even today. Our society needs to wake up to the extreme pathology, ill health that has invaded our country, particularly my home state, Kerala, is in a very poor way. In fact, there is every reason to worry about not only the future of Kerala, but even the present of Kerala. The extent to which the Kerala society has become sick to its core should really worry and alarm each one of us. And a concerted effort to ground children via education in the culture of living harmoniously together, living in peace, needs to be prioritized in an unprecedented manner in Kerala, indeed throughout the country, and I would argue throughout the world. So I wish all my fellow Keralites, all my fellow countrymen, all my brothers and sisters anywhere in the world, a future of peace. We deserve peace and not the misery of war. War is ugly. War is brutal. War is inhuman. It robs us of the right to be human. Nothing worse needs to be said about it. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be children of God." May God bless and heal the global human community. Amen.